big thank you to the LRF for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of such a prestigious audience today. And on that note, let's just throw something out there. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a civil engineer, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is around culture. So if we do get to Q&A, keep them simple, please. I am very grateful to come and talk to you about what not a lot of people know around Tideway and what Tideway is and what is very close to becoming the next largest infrastructure project in Europe, right here on our doorstep in the capital city. And I'm going to cover three things. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the program itself, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about how we are addressing health and safety at Tideway and the transformational approach that we're trying to instill within our supply chain, and tied into that, how we actually measure performance of that supply chain. And I must say, I have to pick up on one thing that I've noticed today. I urge all of the innovators within this room not to just think about bringing safety to life, but bringing health and safety to life. It's a real passion of mine, particularly working in UK construction. 100 times more people die from ill health and disease caused by work than die from accidents in the workplace. So if you are involved in that field, please help us create the technology that eliminates that exposure to risk. And we might come back onto that in due course. So what is Tideway? Well, we have a strapline that we are reconnecting London and Londoners with the Thames. And it astonished me, and I think the stat will come up on one of the subsequent slides. But if I stood here today and said to you, there is a capital city somewhere in the world that every year 62 million cubic meters of sewage discharge into their river, I'll wager that not many within this room would say that that is London. But that is what we're dealing with in this capital city at the moment. 62 million cubic meters of sewage discharges into our river every single year. That's why we're losing contact with the river. We're not using the river as it should be. And the start of this project and the 150 years beyond is really about how we open that river up again to the communities that live on and around the Thames. I want to take you back to the 1800s first and foremost and look at what the Thames was then and the tributaries running into it. But quite quickly, that became its natural sewage system. Those tributaries would discharge into the main river and out to sea, and quite quickly, as I say, became the outflow. So this guy, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, was a pioneer in this area. And in the aftermath of 1850, I mean, before 1850, around about 1830, 1840, we had several outbreaks of cholera in London, decimated the population. By the time we got to 1858, our own parliament was dissolved because of the great stink that was coming from the river itself. So in 1860, Sir Joseph Bazalgette decided we needed some system to divert and to control this sewage. And he was a future thinker. In 1860, the population of London was 2 million. And he put some future-proofing into that and said that he would design a system for 4 million population. The population in London now is 8 million. Well, it was in 2013. We're pushing 10 million already. So the reason for Tideway is not because the sewage system is failing. I've been down these sewage systems, and they are fantastic. The workmanship that was in place in 1860 is astonishing that they're still there. It is purely capacity. So the idea of Tideway is really to deal with this population. Also the change in infrastructure on the surface. We don't have as much actual land in London now, so there's not the runoff of surface water you would have expected back in Sir Joseph's day. So that 62 million cubic meters is around about one discharge every week into the Thames. And it only takes 2 millimeters of rain for that sewage to discharge into our river. And that's what you get. So that's a CSO, a combined sewer overflow, where Bazalgette's sewage system can't cope and it has to go somewhere, so it discharges into our river. I've put the Royal Albert Hall in there just to try and put this into context. 62 million cubic meters is the equivalent of filling the Albert Hall with sewage 450 times. That's what's going into our river. So what is our project? It's a little over £4 billion. We estimate that we did have an original construction schedule around 8 years. We're trying to do that much quicker. It's a 25-kilometre tunnel, 7.2 metres in diameter, running from east to west. And it essentially follows the path of the Thames. And really, it is just a diversion. So all of the overflows themselves will run into our new tunnel. It's estimated that we'll employ around about 5,000 people at the peak of construction. And again, that's why health and safety and culture is vitally important to us on the programme. This is how it will look. It's been designed so that there is roughly a 1 metre every 800 metre fall. So the idea is that the tunnel itself will be self-cleaning. In the west, the shaft depth is around 35 metres down to 65 metres in the sands of the east. And obviously that brings its own challenges moving from clay through to the Thanet sands that we have for tunnelling when we get round to it. Again, some impressions of what it will look like. So this is just how it connects. Clearly, we've got to connect those sewers in. So the engineering design is well underway, almost complete, on how we reclaim some of the land to create the footprint, but also how we build these vortex shafts so that we can divert that sewage directly into our new tunnel. That's Blackfriars as it currently stands, and that's what it will look like when we're finished. Interestingly, we've got 27 sites across London, and when we're finished, we will actually add over 5 acres of new urban space to London because we're reclaiming some parts of the Thames to allow us to build these shafts and connect into the ultimate tunnel. So that's just a very, very quick overview. But it is really all about, from my perspective, how we make sure that we don't hurt people whilst they're working on our programme. We're very fortunate in the UK that we have a strong legislative framework. That has been in place for a number of years, but we've also had the benefit of building on previous infrastructure projects. And the Olympics were very good. Before them, we had the Channel Tunnel Rail Link. We then subsequently had T5, Crossrail, which was my previous role. And now we at Tideway are tasked with raising that bar yet again. And it is transformation, what we're trying to do. We're trying to do things the right way. We've avoided using the word zero or target zero or zero harm. We're trying to put a positive spin on things and saying that we will do right things and we will do them safely or not at all. But we're also conscious that each of our joint ventures within our supply chain have their own way of doing things. So at the heart of the success, as we see it, is a collaborative approach between client and contractor, or client and supply chain. And the piece that you see on the chart behind me that I call my collaboration chart, the piece that's blank, is where we as a real client come to the fore. And this is what I call my cross-pollination band. And it's really where we take the responsibility to identify the pockets of excellence that are absolutely out there and how we take those and make sure they're reapplied across the entire programme. I don't care what anyone says, if you're in construction, you're working for an organisation, you're very focused on the bottom line. Our joint ventures, our supply chain are not always at the forefront or don't always have the appetite to share their best practice. It's there. What we have to do is extract it and make sure it cross-pollinates and it populates across the entire programme. And that all feeds in to the right way. So they do things, we identify them as fantastic, we then share them across the programme. It's as simple as that. There's nothing complex in it. Some of the things that we have been working on, induction is a massive part of any construction project. I'm sure many of you have been involved in that, have sat through the dreary PowerPoint presentation where you turn pages and you sit and probably doze off in the nice warm room where somebody tells you about the requirements on that site. The most important part for us when people arrive is understanding that we are serious about this. So we've invested several millions of pounds in what we call EPIC. It is a new induction program. It starts with number 1 on the left, which is what we call the onboarding centre. So every individual, whether you're working for us for a day or whether you're working with us for the next 5 years, visits the onboarding centre. And the critical part of that is we've introduced a communications assessment. So we can get an understanding of whether that individual can understand both spoken, written, and visual English and health and safety terminology. We have, in the listening side, for example, we have Scousers, we have Scotsmen, we have Irishmen, we have Geordies, and making sure people can actually understand them, because that's what you're going to interact with when you're out on site. The top right you see there is the EPIC program itself, is the one-day induction, and it's an immersive experience. I'm not going to tell you anything more about it because we're keeping it secret. And we don't want the secret to get out, but we've had 4,000 people through it already, and the secret remains. If you are interested in EPIC, please drop me a line. But it's about people coming along and understanding not just about health and safety, but the impacts that an incident would have and who they actually affect, and really making it personal. The feedback has been fantastic in every single situation. We then have site inductions, as you would expect, because you need to understand the appropriate risks on site. And then number 4 is, we don't want people just to focus on the job that they're doing in one particular area. We want them to understand the 25-kilometre tunnel, and we want them to understand the extent of the Tideway programme. And therefore, we take them on a half-day boat trip. We do the project, and we also do a little bit of London sightseeing. So many people that have lived here for years, have never seen all of this, find that wonderful and really engaging. And then before they get on site, they are involved in being kitted out with their new PPE, their Tideway PPE. That's a breakdown of the EPIC Centre. As I say, I'm not going to go into great detail, but the main event happens in the middle, and then we have a number of peripheral rooms around the outside, and groups move from that room to the next room to the next room to understand what happens in the immediate aftermath. We've also invested heavily in welfare facilities. Now, in my 20 years experience, generally when you go on a construction site, you're very lucky if you've got a porta cabin to get changed in when you first get there. And then even when you get into main construction, the standards of welfare that we give for the people that are doing the actual work are appalling. They are nothing short of appalling. So we've invested and insisted that our supply chain invest in proper welfare facilities. Now, some say, well, that's a waste of money. It may well be, but as far as I'm concerned, if you can show these individuals that you are really taking care of them and that you are really thinking about them as individuals, and you provide them with the same things that we would expect in our nice glass offices, then they might start thinking differently when they get out on site. We've designed our own PPE so they feel special when they're working for us, but it's not just about the visual aspect of it. On the right-hand side of the slide you see there is an investment that we've made in new safety footwear. We took all of the statistics from the Olympics and from Crossrail, and as you would expect in construction, slips, trips and falls continues to be a major problem. So we worked with some of the major manufacturers of PPE. We worked with ski boot manufacturers. We worked with Ronnie Irani, the cricketer, to get a new insole that provides better support. And the outcome is what we've got on the right-hand side. It's a bespoke boot that's designed for Tideway, and every individual on Tideway gets a pair. Just putting it into context, your standard pair of safety footwear would cost you around about £50. This costs £120 a pair. And we're insisting that everybody has them because they are the very best. And it's investing in their future. And it's the right thing to do. It's the right way. But there is a catch. They've got to deliver against the expectation. So what we've decided to do, and we built on this from the work that had happened on Crossrail that I was also involved in, very much focusing on leading indicators, moving away from the traditional accident frequency rates that everybody thinks of, and really focusing on the positive things that people do that impact the outputs. Get the inputs right and the outputs take care of themselves. So we've created a health and safety performance index, which is simply a suite of KPIs that are measured on a monthly basis. I think at the moment we've got 14. So every contract gets measured on 14 measures every month, together with an assessment that's carried out twice per year. And we average that up, and that creates the HSPI. And it's surprising how when you have a number against positive intervention and you put people in a league table, nobody wants to be at the bottom. So what we generate is enthusiasm, momentum, just to move up and raise that bar that I mentioned in my transformational model earlier. It's getting the supply chain to improve and move up that program. It's not that we don't focus on accident frequency rates. We do. We do monitor those, but we only monitor them to make sure that the inputs that we are measuring are the right inputs. In the ideal world, the HSPI goes up and the accident frequency rate stays low or comes down. If it's not, it's simply you're focusing on the wrong things. So we change the inputs to impact the outputs. So that's the validation on the AFR. And the history that we've had on this from my time at Crossrail proves it. We've known for some years now that good health and safety is good business. We know that, but now we've got data to show this. And this was kicked off in September 2012. We had the contractors plotted on this chart that you see behind me, and we preserved their anonymity. So everybody knew which number they were, but they didn't know who everyone else was. It quite quickly became the worst kept secret in the business because everybody wanted to know who everybody else was and what they were doing to be that side of the curve. And that was okay. I won't share with you outside of the contract who was at the top and who was at the bottom, but internally we had transparency. Quite quickly, through that cross-pollination band, we started to get the contractors moving to the right-hand side of the curve. And then by the time we got to 2013 and into 2014, we were in what we call the value add zone. And interestingly, this was not the only thing that was measured in contractor performance. We measured their environmental performance, their quality, their sustainability, their cost and schedule performance. And surprise, surprise, the best organizations managed all of those and were in the top right-hand curve in every single element. So good health and safety is good business. So these are the things that we're trying to do just to change culture, to do things the right way. It's about leadership. We've got commitment from the most senior level. We've got a budget that goes with that. We're trying to create an entirely different feel on construction sites, something entirely different to what they've experienced before. Not just better welfare, we're talking about the best welfare that they've ever come across. Involvement is important, collaboration between companies, but also getting individuals to tell us what it is that we need to do to make their life better whilst they're working with us. They set the standards, not us. The communications assessment that I spoke about is pioneering. We're working with Loughborough University on this, and we're feeding back into a research paper on how impactful that is, and by the end of the program, hopefully we'll have the results of that. I mentioned at the outset, we have a strong focus on health and well-being. I've been quoted before as saying, for too long in this industry, we've shouted safety and whispered health, and we need to get parity back there and say we need to start focusing on that health element. Not just physical health, but also mental health. One further shocking statistic for you to take away, which is something I'm working on in the industry more generally. If you work in construction, you are 6 times more likely to commit suicide than you are to die from a fall from height. Yet we spend millions on prevention of falls from height, yet nothing on mental health. Watch this space, we're doing something. Collaborative approach through our alliance, which is the client and the supply chain, and that focus on leading indicators, as I mentioned at the outset. I appreciate that was a very, very swift run through. I could have talked all morning about Tideway. I love this program, and I love what we're doing to change health and safety within the industry. I hope you found that useful. I'm hoping we've got time for questions, but if not, please feel free to get in touch via the contact on here. Thank you.
Questions, please. Down here.
I wonder if you've got a view as to the role some of the emerging wearable technology can play in raising the bar of what world-class performance is, or is it a potential distraction away from culture and individual and personal responsibility?
No, absolutely. We need to be pushing those boundaries. I've got to say that my understanding of the technology itself is very low at the moment. It started to attract my attention 3 weeks ago. I was speaking at a conference in Abu Dhabi, And there was a US organization that was talking about this. It was fascinating. That's got to be the future. How we can monitor individuals. We have to do it sympathetically and sensitively, obviously. But if we can understand where individuals are and what they're being exposed to and the potential health risks, then we can clearly prevent it. Arguably, we shouldn't even be there, because if we can invest in the technology to eliminate the person from the risk, then that's what we should be doing in the first instance. And if we can invest more in robotic technology and remote work, then we would be there. But I absolutely agree that is a technology that is the future.
Hi, I'm Doug Owen from the Schumacher Institute. As somebody who's myself worked in health and safety management over the years as well, it's absolutely fantastic to hear what you're doing. And it seems to me that the thing that stands out is not so much necessarily the individual elements of what you're doing, which, are really cool and really interesting, but the fact that you are investing in it in the first place. So what I want to ask is so what's different about Tideway? How were you able to corral the resources to actually do this in one of many industries that's very resistant, typically, to dealing with this stuff?
Quite simply, it comes from that leadership commitment that we spoke of. We as an executive team have agreed the approach. I have a very supportive chief exec. We have a very supportive group of investors that understand where we're going with this. But the data that we presented to them was against the previous infrastructure program. So if you plot the accident frequency rates from the Channel Tunnel rail link, from Terminal 5 at Heathrow, from the Olympics and from Crossrail, every single one of them in the first 18 months went like this and peaked up at around about I think the Olympics, which had a fantastic record, in the first 18 months were about 0.8, 0.9 per 100,000 hours. And then what happens is they come down. And it's almost as if individuals get used to working with you and get used to working in that culture. So what we said was, we can't afford to do that. You can't afford to have that 18 months grace. We've got to do it at the front end. And it is about doing it at the enabling works and getting it right at the front end. Time will tell. You know, I'm hoping that our investment pays off. I'm confident our investment will pay off. If it doesn't, I think we need to look at other things. But we have to stop that peak at the start and the first 18 months of any program.
Thank you. David Petreka from the Nautical Institute. Really liked what you were saying. I come from the maritime side of things. Given your experience, in a project this big, you have a lot of control. And you're using it very well. How do you see the lessons that you're learning come down into the small building projects? And one of my interests is in the fishing industry, where we still have a huge lack of health and safety. Health, safety, mental health, all of that. But they're very small operators, and they've got this, they've got a culture which everybody can understand. So how does the lessons learned at that scale trickle down? Thank you.
Yeah, it's not just fisheries. It's exactly the same in construction. When we're talking about the SMEs, very difficult, hard to reach organizations, you know, very, very small organizations, 3, 4, 5 team organizations that are tier 3, 4 or below within the supply chain. Our focus here is everyone. So it is the entire supply chain. It's not just Tideway, it's not just the main works contractors. So everyone goes through this immersive experience, everyone gets the PPE, everyone is expected to perform as we expect, regardless of which level in the supply chain you are. From a maritime perspective, because we are on the river, we have a commitment to do more by river. So we are moving, or we are committing to move most of our spoil from the tunnels via barges on the Thames. What we're already finding is that the culture that exists within the river community is a lot lower than what it is and what our expectations are. So we're upskilling those individuals and saying, if you want to work with Tideway, this is what we expect of you. So internally, it's quite easy because we can make it a contractual obligation. But what we also feel is through our legacy commitments and through our sustainability strategy, we have an obligation to do something for the industry. So we're working in a number of different industry bodies in trying to get this message through. I actually sit on the executive team of what we call the Health and Construction Leadership Group, which is addressing respiratory health and mental health in construction. If you are interested, watch this space. In January, we will be launching the new Mates in Mind programme, which is a mental health and wellbeing programme for UK construction. And it's about addressing the stigma and identifying how people get support. We are a long way away and reaching that supply chain. Construction in the UK employs 2.9 million people, and we've just got to keep chipping away at it and setting these benchmarks so that when we move to the next large infrastructure project, when people arrive, they go, this is not what I'm used to. I'm used to what we had on Tideway. And they raise the bar themselves. There's not a silver bullet. I wish there was. But it's just keep eating away at it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Good job.